Good evening and welcome. I am Amarachi Ubani. Tonight, Senate investigates alleged infraction in President Buhari's extra budgetary spending on Tucano fighter jets as some of the lawmakers call for his impeachment. Members of the House of Representatives disagree over President Buhari's request to include cost of purchased Tucano aircraft in the 2018 budget. The National Economic Council insists on ranching of cattle, says movement of herdsmen must stop across the country, especially in states affected by ongoing farmers and herders crisis. And U.S. actor Bill Cosby is found guilty on 3 counts of sexual assault.
On business news tonight, Nigerian Communications Commission remits 49.7 billion naira to federal government's consolidated revenue account, maintains plan to actualize 30% broadband target.
In sports news tonight, Nigeria Football Federation confirms the Super Eagles will play their farewell match against the DR Congo in Port Harcourt before leaving the country for this year's FIFA World Cup in Russia.
And from Abuja, labor unions insist on 66,500 naira as new national minimum wage for workers in the country.
We begin tonight with the Senate's probe of the President's anticipatory approval and payment of $496 million to the U.S. government for the purchase of 12 Tucano aircraft. Federal lawmakers insist that President Muhammadu Buhari's action violates the Constitution. On that basis, opposition senators have also called for his impeachment. Our correspondent, Linda Kigbe, reports.
There are serious consequences for violation of our Constitution.
The chairman of the Senate committee maintains that President Buhari's anticipatory approval for the payment of $496 million to the U.S. government for the purchase of 12 Tucano aircrafts violates the Constitution.
So, Mr. President, as a consequence, the only thing that we can draw from on this is that we call on you, Mr. President, to invoke Section 143 of this Constitution.
Section 143 of the Constitution, which Senator Orogide wants the Senate President to invoke, deals with the impeachment of the President. Lawmakers from the opposition PDP agree with Senator Orogide's position.
It's an unpeaceable offense and we cannot allow that. We cannot stay here and Nigerians will be, the assembly will be taken for granted.
I remember the late Okadibo was removed from office based on anticipatory budgetary. We have no other thing to do than to follow the Constitution, which my colleague has quoted, Section 143 of the Constitution.
But lawmakers from the ruling APC opposed the call for the impeachment of President Buhari.
I do not think we should impeach the president, but we should demand that the money be returned to follow due process to the end.
As far as I'm concerned, this is the first time that expenditure of this kind, money that was withdrawn from excess crude account, is being discussed in this National Assembly. This is a PDP conspiracy, Mr. President. And I would like PDP to come out today to tell us which of their governors have taken the money released on excess crude account to the states who are taken to state assemblies for approval.
To approve
Senate President Bukola Saraki puts forward his position on the matter, and the Senate takes a position.
Between September and February, with all due respect, there were ample time for the executive to have carried us along on this issue. The suggestion of the leader that let us send it to judiciary to advise one whether truly, from those who are not laymen, whether the Constitution has been breached, two, the circumstances surrounding that, whether it does in any way justify that, they will advise us.
The Committee on Judiciary is to report back to the Senate on Wednesday, May 2nd on its findings, which is expected to ascertain if indeed President Buhari committed an infraction by giving anticipatory approval for the payment of $496 million to the U.S. government for the purchase of 12 Tucano aircrafts. Linda Akibe, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, the presidential request to include the $496 million fund for the purchase of Tucano aircraft in the 2018 appropriation bill has generated some controversy in the House of Representatives. The lawmakers are divided over a motion for the request, which was presented by the acting deputy leader of the House in the name of the majority leader. A letter from President Buhari was read on the floor of the House explaining his reasons for granting approval for the purchase of the Tucano fighter aircraft. Our correspondent, Terry Ikumi, has the report.
For the second time this week, the matter of the Tucano aircraft purchase approved by President Muhammadu Buhari is brought up in the Green Chamber. This time it is a motion to include the $496 million for the purchase of the aircraft in the 2018 appropriation bill.
Request to include the sum of $496,374,470 in the 2018 appropriation bill.
And now this one is not a bill, and we are urging ourselves to ask the executive to allow us initiate a bill and put it in a bill process that is going on. This matter ought to be thrown away.
Then suddenly, the House is divided over the procedures for presentation of bills and respect for the Constitution.
There is no provision therein wherein a bill has been committed to a committee and the bill is under consideration. It has not been brought to the committee of the whole.
It should have come as a bill anyway. If it's a money bill, then we'll not talk about it as a money bill. But you're bringing it as a motion for us to decide. And I mean, let's not do the wrong things and set a precedent here.
But don't forget that the 2018 Appropriation Act is being worked upon. And so as long as it has not been approved, there is no way you can come by another bill.
To guide the House appropriately, they call lawyers in the House.
The process is unconstitutional. It goes against democracy, and it goes against every principle of law.
I appeal to my honorable colleagues to please let reason prevail and let us discuss this issue as honorable men and women of the parliament.
The Speaker halts further debate on the matter and gives his ruling.
My ruling would be to still refer this matter to the Committee on Rules and Business to check the archives of the House or other parliaments elsewhere to see whether there's any precedent that we can ground this communication on, and then we'll proceed.
The conversation in the Green Chamber is more about ensuring that the powers of Parliament are respected and the right precedence is set. Some of the lawmakers are clear on their stand that the money has already been spent and should not be allowed into a budget that is yet to be approved. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
Despite the National Assembly's objections, the National Economic Council is backing the President's request for anticipatory approval of the purchase of the Tucano fighter planes. Addressing State House correspondents after the Council meeting, Governor Abubakar Badaru of Jigawa State explained the purchase was done under emergency circumstances. According to Governor Badaru, the federal government had sought to purchase the military equipment in several markets but failed. And when the United States offered the opportunity, there was no time to waste.
We have been battling with approval from America to buy this equipment since 2014. We have been begging Americans to sell these equipments for us. We tried Dubai, they could not allow because it's patented. We tried, I think there is a factory in one of the, I think it's in Brazil. The federal government tried, we couldn't get. The Americans still couldn't sell to Nigeria. Then luckily, the president said it's okay to buy. That's President Trump. So we have to quickly buy before they change their mind. Because there is also a deadline, and this is state-to-state transaction, no middleman. And we are all here concerned about security. And they're raising questions on how and manner on which you protect people. This is an emergency situation. So this thing has to be understood clearly and look at the whole situation in the fuller perspective, not a narrow perspective. The president did what he has to do to protect his people, and that is what happened. And you know, something might just happen, and then the Americans will say, no, stop. But we have paid now, they will have to supply.
Let's examine the issue further. I'm now being joined on the News at 10 by Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Dr. Paul Ananaba. You're welcome to the News at 10.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening. It's a lot going on with the lawmakers on the floor of the Senate and as well as the National Assembly, and the ministers trying to defend the government on its position concerning security and the purchase of the Tucano aircrafts. So what do you make of the whole issue now of the lawmakers calling for an impeachment of the president?
Well, generally speaking, many times both the lawmakers and Nigerians mixed up removal of the president with impeachment. Well, impeachment is the procedure, and the result is removal of the president. Going specifically to what is going on. By the Constitution, Section 143, the National Assembly can undertake impeachment procedure to remove the president. And that is when they are able to say that there has been a gross violation of the Constitution. And then the problem with it is that by Section 143(11) of the Constitution, it is only the National Assembly that can determine what a gross violation of the Constitution is. It's a situation where the Constitution does not even say it is the court. The court has they cannot interpret what's gross misdemeanor. So when you have a flip on the American situation, even a misdemeanor, a small offense, is enough for the Assembly to say, well, the Congress or the Senate to say, well, this is an impeachable offense. Now, going specifically to the purchase of the aircraft. Now, the point is that even though the Senate leadership had agreed that they were aware when it was being purchased, the issue is that they are questioning the procedure, that it should have been done in accordance with constitutional provision. Of course, government should not spend money that is not appropriated. The procedure, the problem is, can they go back to appropriate now? That's a different issue.
Yes.
But every Nigerian knows that there are security issues. Now, should the president actually be said to be ready or to be set for impeachment because of purchasing of the aircraft, when he has said that these aircrafts are for security purposes?
But shouldn't he have followed due process? I mean,
presented,
the bill.
The problem we have some challenges in this country, where even at the individual level, when things go wrong, you rarely see someone say, "I'm sorry," or "Please, this was why." I expect that the National Assembly, being an assembly controlled by the APC or as a party, that they should, between the executive and the legislator, work out a way of making other members of the National Assembly understand in details why that. And I tell you that in the courts, even fundamental rights issues take a back seat when national security is an issue. Because if there's no security, the National Assembly will not sit. And as people are dying every day, and there are calls on the president and the service chiefs and all that, I think that even though the procedures were not followed, going forward, I expect that Mr. President and his team will pay a lot of attention to the security issues in accordance with the Constitution.
So in other words, you're saying there's no right or wrong in this? I mean,
no, I'm not saying
the
procedure did not follow the Constitution. The President explained, this is why I didn't do this. It was urgent. I needed to get these things. I needed to protect life and property. That is my major business. But going forward, I expect that the President and his team will try as much as they can, even if it is not a formal approach, but a subtle and indirect reaching out to the National Assembly so that we don't have. And let me make this point.
I'm afraid we won't be able to take
just a point.
I'm so
that
sorry.
This country cannot afford the distraction. We have a few more days for elections.
And let's leave it at that. Thank you so much, Dr. Paul Ananaba, for being here on the News at 10. In part 2, after the break, Senate concurs with House of Representatives summons President over the insecurity in the country. Please stay with us.